We are now part of the endless Friendly Fire broadcast live coverage of the State of the Union. That's right. By the time this is over, Andrew Klavan will be dead. And Matt Walsh, his beard will be gray and he will have no hair. So, a lot's going to happen in the next few years because that's how long we are slated to be together. Basically, we are now doing the extended director's cut of all three movies of Lord of the Rings, because that's what tonight is going to be. So we have with me, of course, Matt Walsh, who is suffering, and Andrew Klavan, who is likely to suffer with me even more. Somehow Matt begged out of part of the show, which I got to say, that's a smooth move. Yeah, I know. I'm also confused as to how Matt is able to pull rank, and I'm stuck here all night with you, Klavan, as we go wall to wall on this coverage. It's a full-scale disaster. Folks, this is why you should subscribe for this kind of sparkling commentary. So I'll begin with Walsh because I'm going to get my money's worth out of Walsh. He usually speaks in these Friendly Fire episodes. I should get 15 words out of Walsh in a typical Friendly Fire episode. So we have to get all 15 of them in before the actual State of the Union address, which is to begin at 9 p.m. So, Matt Walsh, how pumped are you to be here for yet another State of the Union address? And can we expect your excitement levels to achieve the highest form of excitement, or will your soul leave your body in excitement? How excited are you here?
Well, I don't have a soul to begin with, so it can't leave my body. What I'm excited about is that when you guys come back to talk about and analyze the State of the Union, I'm going to be fast asleep in bed. That's I don't know what story I gave them, but I'm just going to actually be asleep. That's the truth of it. Let's just be honest about it. Look, I feel the same way you do, Ben, about the State of the Union addresses. That obviously they're mostly pointless, and if there's any kind of movement in the polls, it will last for 5 seconds and it won't matter anymore. So that's generally the case. I do think that if there's any, if I were to predict that anything out of this, or if anything, makes an impact out of this speech, I would guess it's likely to be less what Trump says in the speech and more the antics of the Democrats. And I guess there's going to be fewer of them in the room now because a lot of them are boycotting. They're doing competing events. They've got their own competing State of the Union. I saw someone mention on Twitter. It's literally The Office. It's like something Michael Scott would do, and that's what they're doing now. But I expect that we heard about some of the illegal immigrants that are going to be attending. Ilhan Omar and others along with her. And so, but I expect that the Democrats in the room, they're probably going to get a lot of antics out of that. And so if anything really makes an impact, it's going to be them embarrassing themselves. And I think we're kind of at a point. Look, the State of the Union has always been pointless. I think we're all on the same page. He should just send an email and be done with it. But if there was ever a time when there was any sort of function of the State of the Union, which I guess is supposed to be, you've got both sides that are there and they're kind of unified, and we're hearing the vision for the country going forward, and there's supposed to be a little show of kind of unity and togetherness and some decorum. And I think that's kind of the point of it, the pageantry. But that's out the window now. We can't do that anymore. Those days are long gone. And so it just makes it all the more why are we even still doing this with the State of the Union? We're at a point now where the Democrats cannot even pretend to have any basic respect for the other side at all. They cannot do it. They refuse to do it. And so I imagine they're going to humiliate themselves.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think it'll be amusing to see what sort of antics they play. Will there be juggling? Will eggs be hurled? Will they bring illegal immigrants into the chamber? That was mentioned by Cabot. I had not heard that, but again, I think it would be fabulous if Tom Homan just started muscling his way through the Democratic caucus with handcuffs and started dragging people away. That would be the best version of this. Matt and I were actually in the room for this last time, and so again, I'm jealous of Matt that he gets to go to sleep this evening. Andrew Klavan, I want to get your commentary on this because it will be your last commentary on this earth. Because while Matt's soul is likely to leave his body out of excitement, yours is likely to leave your body out of, death. But first, I do want to talk to you about the fact that you are still alive. And I feel like one of the reasons you are still alive is because you've been eating your fish. That's why. So I need you to tell me about Wild Alaskan.
I am a lifelong fisherman. Not many people know this. I used to fish every single day when I was young. I fished all over the place. I fished lakes. I fished in oceans and rivers. And one of my favorite places to fish was Alaska, because you can pull a halibut. If you hook a halibut, they don't fight. They just hang there on the line, but they're really heavy. So it's like lifting a piece of lead, and they just taste great. And that's why we can sell people with a good heart wild Alaskan company. It's the best way to get wild caught, perfectly portioned, nutrient dense seafood delivered directly to your door. It's not me delivering it, but it is my soul delivering it. You have not tasted any fish this good. It's 100% wild caught, never farmed. And this means there are no antibiotics, GMOs, or additives, just clean, real fish that support healthy oceans and fishing communities. I mean, you're allowed to eat fish, right, Ben?
Yes, I am allowed to eat fish. That is the thing that I'm allowed to eat. But honestly, the person in my office, because of kosher reasons, who has been enjoying the fish is producer Phil, who's looking fit as a fiddle and ready for love, as they say. Well, apparently it is sustainably sourced, wild caught from Alaska. Every order supports sustainable harvesting practices, and your membership delivers flexible shipments, expert tips, and truly feel-good seafood. Matt, I believe that you also are a fisherman. I'm surrounded by men of the wilderness. Matt, talk about how good this seafood is.
Yes, yes, Ben, that's correct. I also enjoy fishing. One of my favorite things to do. And when I like to catch fish, but I can catch fish, but I prefer to have them sent to me. It's a lot easier that way, and I don't have to prepare it either. So.
Well, thank you for that sterling endorsement, Matt Walsh. Not all fish are the same. Get seafood you can trust. Head on over to wildalaskan.com/friendlyfire for $35 off your first box of premium wild-caught seafood. That's wildalaskan.com/friendlyfire for $35 off your first order. Thanks to Wild Alaskan Company for sponsoring this episode of Friendly Fire. Okay, so Andrew, I was calling on you, and then I immediately shifted into the way that we make money, of course, which is our ads. So I'm going to throw it back to you, because as the hours tick down on your life, and you realize that you're going to have to spend the next several hours with me listening to an interminable address interrupted 1,273 times by applause, what are your last thoughts on this earth?
Yes, it's like head barreling into infinity. You know, what I kind of like about the Democrats is the last time there was a State of the Union, they behaved so badly that even they must have felt, if they have the capacity for shame, they must have felt a little bit of shame. I mean, Trump was praising a child with cancer, and they sat on their hands. I mean, they couldn't applaud for anything at all. So the question was, they must have gathered together and thought, can we act like adults who respect our country and respect our fellow countrymen, taking a vote and said, no, we can't. So we're just not going to show up at all. They're going to sit at the children's table where you can throw food until mommy finds out. You can just play around and pretend that you're not part of the government. And I think that that's actually the state we're in. I think it is an amazing thing that we have reached a place where we have two major parties. One of them is kind of incompetent, the Republicans, but the other one is actually out to destroy the country. They actually feel, when they get up and they say things like there are no illegals on stolen land, they're actually saying this country doesn't belong here. You're not supposed to be here. And that we're supposed to vote for people, and people do vote for people whose entire intent is to shut the country down and make it go away. And they're ashamed of us, and they're ashamed of George Washington, they're ashamed of everything. So I think this is actually kind of a symbolic moment. I've come closer to you, Ben, on how I feel about the State of the Union. It never used to bother me, the imperial part of it, but now it kind of does. Now that our Congress is like a dead letter, that they're just sort of sitting around, the Supreme Court is trying to wake them up with like the shock paddles, take back your powers. Like, no, don't make us take back our powers. Now it is kind of like having Caesar get up there and give a speech. So it's kind of I don't know, the whole thing is a disgrace on every side. And one thing you can be sure of is Trump will play right into that. He's going to be cursing out the Supreme Court.
That's the part that, that I think that it's going to be an epic episode of Good Trump, Bad Trump, right? Which is something that I used to do on the show a lot, was the Good Trump, Bad Trump. I think you'll get some very good Trump. He's going to call on the U.S. men's hockey team, which is going to be great. Frankly, he should just call them down to the stage and just let them take the stage, and then you should just walk out. I think that'd be the best version of this. My ideal State of the Union here is men's hockey team at the front and Tom Homan arresting people in the back, and that's America. I think that's like the best version of this. But I think that the high points will obviously be him calling out some of the people. Erica Kirk is showing up as well, which I think is a terrific invitation by the president, obviously, in the face of Candace Owens' is tremendous evil, which I'm just going to put out there, what she's doing to Erica
Candace
Kirk
Owens
right now.
Fly by on a broomstick saying, send out Erica.
I mean, as a person who doesn't often use the adjective satanic, what Candace is doing right now is absolutely satanic to Erica Kirk. And I think Erica showing up at the State of the Union in honor of her husband, so the president can talk about left-wing violence against right-wingers, is absolutely good by the president, good on the president for doing it. I think those will be high points. Again, I'll be a little surprised if the Democrats sit on their hands for those things, because I think that would be so unbelievable. I mean, you were right, Matt. Last year they literally sat on their hands for a kid with cancer. So anything is possible at this point. But Matt, I want to ask you, if you were the president, what is the thing that you would say to turn this around? Because obviously he's kind of sinking in the approval ratings. He's not doing great. The generic congressional ballot has the Democrats up like 5 points. In all likelihood, that means the Republicans not only lose the House, but probably the Senate falls to 50-50. You're advising the president for a moment. You're writing his speech. What do you tell him to do?
Well, first I would tell him, get a better advisor, because I'm the worst person you could probably ask this question to. And I will say that I do enjoy that this is the most cynical and depressing intro to a State of the Union that we've probably, and we've given some bad ones. Like it just gets worse every year. But for good reason. No, the thing is, and it's kind of funny, because although we feel this way about the State of the Union, I mean, Trump does have actually things to celebrate. He has real achievements. Let's start with the fact that closing down the southern border is a real significant historic achievement that has made America a better place. Doesn't solve all of our problems, but it's something that no president was able to do before him, and that's not his only achievement. So he's got real things to talk about, real things that he can kind of brag about. And so if I'm advising him, it's real simple. Just focus on those things. I mean, yeah, the great patriotic moments, talking about the Olympics, going to the hockey team, that's all great. But talk about the things that you've achieved, the real things. Yeah, we want to talk about the future also. What do you want to do in the future? But part of the point of the State of the Union is supposed to be here. This is where we are right now. This is the state of things right now. So it's kind of also a review of the past year, and being able to highlight those things, and also again being able to contrast that with how the Democrats react to it. I mean, politically, that's going to be very powerful, because I think that, as you mentioned, we saw this last year in the room, that they refused to applaud anything. It didn't matter what he said. And so I would guess, this is one prediction I'll make, is that when he has the line about political violence, condemning political violence, and he mentions Erica, I'm going to guess that a lot of Democrats are not going to applaud that, because they're going to perceive that correctly in a lot of ways as a repudiation of them, because all the political violence is coming from the left. And these are the people that have explicitly or implicitly encouraged it. So I think even something like that, we're not going to get a unified response, and that will tell the American people a lot, I think.
So Drew, I'm going to ask you the same question. You're now advising the president, and aside from telling him that he probably should not say that the Supreme Court is in the pay of a foreign power, and that also he's amazing at reading legal opinions, what else would you tell the president to highlight?
I think a key thing here, the polls are really bad for the president. People are actually saying that they were better off a year ago. And it's hard for me to see how that could possibly be true. I mean, not only is the border closed, crime is down, drug use is down, imports of drugs are down. All of these things have actually improved, but it's got to be about the economy. And I think the affordability question. And the thing, I do not believe it would be possible to impress this on Donald Trump. But it's not a bad idea for him to acknowledge the fact that people are unhappy. This is something I used to say through the whole Biden administration. People were going, the inflation is killing us. And Biden's people would come out and say, no, you're really happy. Things are great. And I thought, I think people know when they can't make the rent. I think people know when they can't get their kids the Christmas presents they want. I think they know when they're not buying the same foods they would be able to afford before. So if people are saying they're unhappy about the economy, they probably are. And there's probably no chart you can point to and no statistic you can point to that's going to make them feel better. So it wouldn't be a bad thing if Trump could muster up just that little mustard seed of humility. And I know, don't laugh when I say Trump and humility in the same sentence, but if he could just muster that little bit of humility to say, hey, I know this is not going as fast as I wish it would, but it is going to go faster, and this is why. And I think that that's just something that is not in Trump's repertoire, and yet I think it would go a long way to just say, it's not always about Donald Trump. It's sometimes about the people, and the people do feel bad about the economy. I'm a little surprised by that. It does seem to me that things have picked up, that not only has inflation gone down, but wages have actually gone up and outstripped inflation. But apparently people are not feeling that yet, and hopefully they will soon, and hopefully that'll turn around the predictions about the midterms. So that would be my main thing.
For my part, I will say that I think that the thing that has been missing, and this is true for both parties, I think the president has done an amazing job of fixing many of the problems left in his lap by Joe Biden. I think that wiping out DEI, closing the southern border, as Matt mentions, going after the transgender agenda, right? These are all huge gaping holes in the American psyche that the president has done a great job of working to heal. I think that what people are missing, and I think where people are feeling dyspeptic, which is my new favorite word, and also just feeling uneasy in their stomachs, is they don't know what are they supposed to think the country looks like in 3 years. Matt, you've talked a lot about AI. There are a lot of worries out there about AI, and I don't think those worries are completely unjustified. Again, I tend to be more of a tech optimist. Matt would like to take every computer apparently in America and just smash it with a hammer, sort of like Office Space. But I think that Matt's sentiment, even for people who are tech optimists, we're like, well, I think it'll be okay, but I'm not kind of like sure it's going to be okay. And I think there are a lot of people out there who are wondering, what does life actually look like 3 years from now? So listing off the accomplishments is one thing, but saying, look, here is what you can look forward to, right? If things go the way that I want them to go, here is what industries are looking like. Here's what your job looks like in a couple of years. Here's what the international scene looks like in a couple of years, right? Just read the trend lines that I've created and take people to a future and then say, and if you stick with me, we can get to this future together. And that's something that actually no president that I can remember has actually ever done. I think they virtually all talked about the thing they did in the last year, but none of them has actually talked about what they want the future to look like in sort of real terms that people can wrap their brains around. The White House did on their YouTube feed actually put out an AI, we'll talk about things that I have wonders whether they help. They put out an AI of President Trump listing his accomplishments. It is a little weird and makes me also want to smash computers with a hammer, actually. It is the president. I don't know why there is a senator in the background who apparently is wearing a neck brace. I don't know. Teddy Kennedy's been dead for a long time. And so I'm not sure what's going on right there. This is a visual of the president apparently taking an oath of office while also listing all of it. Like, so I don't know what's going on here, honestly. And it makes me very disquieted about AI. Guys, you need to stop showing. We're in the uncanny valley. I can't do this. You need to take it away.
One of the things that really bothers me about the conversation, the American conversation, is we've skipped over that part where people say like, wow, human beings invented artificial intelligence. We don't even do that anymore. We go right to the disaster. It's like they come in, look, mother, look, I've invented artificial intelligence. Oh my God, we're all going to die. And I really do think the tech optimism is more realistic at this point than, the Terminator coming to life. I think that it's a shame that we have no way of talking. We can't even win a hockey match without people screaming at each other about some stupid comment in a locker room. It's really bad that this conversation is now just, we immediately go to the anger and the hostility.
Well,
go to the
anger. Go do it. Go to the anger, Matt. Go.
Good. What is the tech? This is what I'd love to hear to the State of the Union. I'd love to hear someone address it, because this is a very real concern that a lot of people have. It's very, very real, and I'm certainly not the only one. Because when I look at it, as I've expressed a million times, what I see is a very high probability that at a minimum in the short to mid term, AI is going to come in, already has come in, and is going to wipe out millions and millions and millions of jobs. And that's already happening. So it's not even like I'm predicting it. That's already happening. The only prediction is that it's going to accelerate, and I think that we have every reason to think that it will. So that's what is almost certainly going to happen. What's the optimistic vision? Why shouldn't we freak out about this?
Okay, so
that's what I'd love for someone to explain.
I agree, and this is why, again, I think that it would be great if you did. I mean, if I were writing the speech for the president, what I would probably say is your medical care is going to get wildly cheaper and better because of AI, which is just true. It's going to get so much cheaper and so much better in the next 5 years. It's going to make your head explode with how good it is. The possibility of you being able to organize your life in better ways is already here. I mean, cloud AI is doing extraordinary stuff in terms of you being able to organize your workflow. Small businesses are going to be able to start, because the cost of starting a small business is going to be reduced so much you won't have to take out big debts in order to go hire 5 people to start your business. You're going to be able to use AI to do all that sort of work. You as a worker are going to become significantly more productive, which means that presumably your hours will be able to be shorter because you're able to be so much more productive with this stuff. There's going to be expansion, particularly in industries where you use your hands. There's going to be a lot of expansion in industries where the human body actually matters. The places that are going to get hit pretty hard are the white collar industries, and particularly kind of the lower half of white collar. You're going to see legal get smoked. So if you really love lawyers, maybe you should be mad at AI. But if you're one of the people who's been making lawyer jokes for the last half century, then probably you're a happy camper. So there are a bunch of things about AI that actually are going to be quite awesome. And I also do not think that the best form of AI is going to be AI alone. I think it's going to be like people who play chess. Yes, computers are better than humans at chess on an average level, but the best version is a great person who is great at chess with a great computer. Doing that is actually the best version. That would actually be the pitch. I'd love to hear somebody make that pitch, actually. But here is my pitch to you. If you want the best in investigative reporting, actual facts in your news and opinions from the most trusted names in conservative media, you need to subscribe right now at dailywireplus.com. We are quickly expanding. That only happens because of members like you. Again, please head on over to dailywireplus.com so we can get you more fabulous investigative material and, of course, sparkling commentary from the likes of those that you are hearing right now. Okay, so to take it away from the State of the Union for just a second, and to take it toward what I think everybody really has their eye on, which is the midterm elections. So, Matt, I want to get your take on where you think we are with the midterms, what to expect, and again, more broadly, how can the president kind of shift the momentum and turn things around?
Well, I think it's everything we've been covering. People, there's a perception in America that, as we talked about in the polls, that we're sort of worse off than we were a year ago. I think that is objectively just not actually true. But that's the perception people have, and elections are all perception. Politics is all perception. It's all that matters, and so you need to change that perception. And you know, highlighting all the wins is one way to do it. I think the messaging on that, it's not all about messaging, but the messaging on that obviously has not been clear enough. I mean, if we can agree that things are by almost every metric, things actually are not worse now than they were under Biden. If we can agree on that, and yet there's this perception that it is, then it's hard for me to see that as anything but a messaging failure. What else can we call that? And so I think that's going to be the key, not just in the State of the Union, but going forward into the midterm elections, is a kind of clear, coherent, unified message addressing that.
Yeah, I think one of the things, Drew, and I want to get your take on this, were it to be I advising the administration, the thing I've been saying forever, all Americans want is normalcy. That's all they want. They just want things to be quiet and normal. That's all. And so if you are able for 5 seconds to deploy people in your administration who are effective at making things be quiet and normal, this means Tom Homan and not, for example, Kristi Noem at DHS. This means, for example, Scott Bessent at Treasury and not Howard Lutnick over at Commerce. It means that if you deploy people who are pros, Marco Rubio in the State Department, who's doing a fabulous job, if you deploy the pros and you tell the American people, listen, we're taking mainstream normie positions that 65%, 70% of the American public agrees with, like deport criminal illegal immigrants. And Democrats are out there unified, ICE out. That, to me, has always been the Trump pitch. And the problem for, I think, President Trump has always been that the actual policy that he effectuates is at war with his rhetoric. Because the policy is always this kind of 65% policy, and he has a really good finger on the pulse of what that feels like, which is why he shifts and he moves when he feels like he doesn't have the pulse. But his rhetoric is always sort of the most extreme and inane version of that thing. And I think that's, at a certain point, the American people are tired. I think that's what you're getting right now. I think the American people are extremely tired. We are 1 year into the Trump administration, too. And it feels like we are all Drew's age, and I'm 42. and Drew feels like he's been around since the 17th century.
Which I actually have. That is one thing. But no, you know, I always ask myself, you know, whenever I watch the Democrats, when the Democrats were in power, when Joe Biden, the worst president in my lifetime, which, as you say, goes back infinitely, you know, when he was in power, I kept seeing things like this. They say, let's cut little boys' testicles off and turn them into little girls. Let's hire people according to the color of their skin. Let's make, you know, women into men and men into women and have them play women's sports. And then they come out and find out they're unpopular, and they say, it must be our messaging. You go like, no, it's not your messaging. And in the same way, I think with Donald Trump, there is, you know, a style and substance difference that is really unnerving to people and plays into the prejudices of the media. So, I mean, Trump says things that he shouldn't say, you know, and I'm sorry. I keep saying this on my show all the time because it's so old fashioned and yet so true. Manners actually matter. You know, it's good manners. You can get very far with good manners and determination, just as far, if not further, than you can get with determination and bad manners. And so, as always, with all of us, you know, Trump's flaws and his strengths are the same. And one of his great strengths is the fact that he's willing to break the rules. He's willing to go into be the bull in the china shop. He's willing to say, oh, yeah, we've done this way for 50 years. It's not working. Let's stop. That is a wonderful trait that Donald Trump has that makes him who he is. But by the same token, he does the same thing with the way he treats people. Usually you don't fire people like in public on the air. No, that's the way I'm going to do it. Usually you don't call the Supreme Court, say they're in the pay of foreign powers. You have some respect for the law. Nah, I'm not going to do that. So that same kind of unbridled, feeling that he brings to his substance, which is great, he brings to his style, which is not so great.
Well, I think this is where, again, the president is at his best. Where he can really deploy that is when he's got his book of enemies open, and because he is absolutely the most effective destroyer in modern American history. What I've always said about the president is that he has the art of politics is making it very hard to vote for your opponents and easy to vote for you. And he's always been amazing at the former and, kind of mixed bag at the latter. Right? He's great at making it hard to vote for Democrats. And so the question, Matt, is who again, the president is looking for a target. What is the target? Who is the target? How does he singularly polarize around a Democratic target? Who's the target-rich environment that he should be going after right now?
I don't know. I mean, I think they all kind of are. The good thing that we have, and we're talking about returning Americans want normal. We want a sense of normalcy. I think that's true. And it brings to mind Gavin Newsom, who I think yesterday, it was on CNN, saying that, well, the Democrats need to be a little bit more culturally normal. So he's doing his whole moderate shtick, which of course is a shtick. He mentions pronouns, so he said maybe we won't be so focused on the pronouns. Very boldly coming out against the pronoun thing 4 years after that peaked anyway. But the advantage that Trump has and Republicans have is that Democrats actually can't do that. Like, at least in theory, Republicans can be normal. Many times a lot of weird stuff happens among Republicans, but they can be normal. That is a possible thing. With Democrats, it's not even possible. It's like inherently impossible because they're progressive. And so what that means, and they would even admit this if you framed it in a more positive way, but it means that it's a constant state of transformation all the time. So there's always a new normal, and so if there's always a new normal, it means that there's never a normal at all. And so Democrats are just not capable of it. I mean, they literally march under a banner that says dismantle. They are the party. They are the side that uses a word like dismantle in a positive way. Conservatives almost never do that. And what are they always trying to dismantle? It's always like fundamental aspects of human society, nuclear family, and so on.
Human nature,
so,
too, yeah.
Right, exactly. So they can't do that. They can talk about it, but they can't actually do it. It's totally against their political project, and Republicans can. And so that's an advantage, and that's maybe something that Trump could try to highlight.
We do have some people arriving at the State of the Union address. Again, many Democrats are not showing up tonight. I wish I had not showed up tonight, but here we are all together, suffering through this together. There's some old people. You can see them. I'm not talking about Klavan again. Those are some old people who people elected. I don't know why. It's just the way this thing works. This elected government of ours is going so well. I believe that's Senators McCormick and Tim Sheehy. McCormick, of course, from Pennsylvania. Tim Sheehy from Montana. And then there are a bunch of people I don't recognize. So, I'm doing a great job. My color commentary here. Wait until I do tennis. He hits the ball and then he also hits the ball. I know that Kalshi, our sponsor, also has a rundown on what Trump is going to say during the State of the Union. If you are feeling lucky and inspired, you can get into the action yourself with the help of our sponsors over at Kalshi. You can head on over to kalshi.com/friendlyfire. Prediction markets are forecasting the odds of President Trump saying words like Somalis, ballroom, fake news, and hoax. Of those, I feel like there's also some odds on surprise guests. I feel like of those words, I'm gonna go hoax. I feel like hoax is always a good standby. A prediction bonanza unseen since the Super Bowl. So definitely check it out right now. Some of the markets, what will Trump say during the State of the Union? So as I say, some of those words will undoubtedly come up. I believe that there is ballroom is at 50-some%. Hoax is at 50-some%. People are very optimistic about him saying words. So that's exciting news from our friends over at There is
might improve the State of the Union.
Yeah, exactly. There's also a prediction market on who is going to attend the State of the Union. No points for Macho Man Randy Savage. But I don't know, guys. I'm punch drunk already. We haven't even begun this thing yet. If you have any idea where to go from here, you let me know. This is why Knowles usually runs Friendly Fire, because believe it or not, it's the only thing he is more professional at than I. But the reason Knowles is not with us is because Knowles is actually at the State of the Union address. So is Isabel
That's how
Brown.
low they have sunk in the State of the Union.
I know, they're really scraping the bottom of the barrel, truly scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Unless he's the usher. I mean, I could see him being the usher.
I mean, my assumption is that in order for you to go to the State of the Union, you have to be hit in the teeth with a hockey stick. So I volunteer right now to make that happen.
That would actually improve Knowles' face.
For Michael. Okay, so Matt, I do want your rant on how much Canada sucks, because that was pretty great. I mean, the United States, if you could not feel a surge of pride at us defeating our communist northern neighbors who murder the disabled, then I'm not sure what exactly we're doing here.
Yeah, it was the first hockey game that I've watched all the way through, and it was pretty exciting, and but most exciting just to watch Canada get vanquished. And what makes it so hilarious, of course, as many people have pointed out, is that hockey is the only thing they know how to do. It's their only sport. It's their only activity. They put their kids in hockey when they're like 6 months old. And for us, it's a niche interest. It's like not even a top 5 sport. We barely even know it exists. And then we just kind of wander over there. We're like, yeah, fine, we'll take the gold in that. So my whole pitch was that I think we should just do this now. And I think our next project should be assemble the greatest cricket team that the world has ever seen, and then go and dominate in cricket. And I want a bunch of drunk Americans going to the Cricket World Series or whatever it's called, tailgating outside, being obnoxious, bragging. We don't even know how the game is played or anything about it. And that's what I think we should do. And I will also say, just quick, on the Canada point, that I'm not totally making the argument that we absolutely should invade Canada and depose its regime, but I am saying that given that America has done this, and we just did it in Venezuela, many of the arguments that have applied and have justified those actions, if you favored them, really do apply to Canada. It's not a crazy thing to talk about. And as you mentioned, Ben, I mean, they are in the middle of a campaign of eugenics. They are executing not terminally ill people, but thousands of people who are, just chronically ill, which is to say they're sick, but they're not going to die of the sickness. And that's just what they're burning down churches, not arresting anybody for it, a partial birth abortion. I mean, it's really just a parade of atrocities in Canada. And so I don't know, it's something we should talk about. Maybe Trump will speculate about it in the State of the Union. I would love that.
Well, also, by the way, we should mention here, before Walsh ducks out and gets his nighty-night sleep, that he has a new episode of Real History that is out right now about the real history of Native Americans, about American Indians. That episode is episode 2 in his wildly popular Real History series. Matt, maybe you want to give people a quick rundown. By the way, you can only get that if you subscribe, because if you don't give us money, then we can't do things at this company, people. So if you want to see that and also give us money, then you should definitely subscribe to see Matt's Real History. Matt, give a little bit of a pitch to episode 2 for yourself.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. This was a fun one to do, and it's a topic that's really interested me for a long time. I've been on this soapbox about the Native Americans for a long time. It's really important because we heard it from Billie Eilish at the Grammys, and this is the idea that America is built on stolen land. We have no right to be here. And that idea, as silly as it is, has been very persuasive to a lot of people. It's been a justification for some of the worst policies that we've ever seen, and some of the worst tyranny in this country and in places like Canada as well. Well, so part of what we're doing in this episode is kind of inspecting that claim. Is that actually true? What actually happened with the Native Americans? What's the real story? We hear about the Trail of Tears, the smallpox blankets. Well, it turns out when you look into it, all that stuff is fake, And we go into that and in great detail, which, as you say, if you subscribe, you can hear all about it.
All right. So, Matt, I appreciate that. And I know that you're going to stay with us for a few more minutes while we watch a bunch of people walk into a room. So that's really, really exciting. Drew, what do you think of what they're wearing? What do you make? What is Chief Justice Roberts wearing? What do you make of his robe? Is it the most elegant robe, or only the second most elegant robe you've ever seen?
I appreciate John Roberts trying to revive our Congress. I thought that was so touching. It's like, couldn't Congress do something sometimes? Come on. Even the guys who agreed with him, the left-wing judges were like, no, we don't want that. We just want to wait until Trump is gone. We want to say Trump can't do it, but our president can do it when he arrives. But John Roberts was like, please, Congress, do something. And poor Clarence Thomas was going, Congress? Is there still a Congress? I I don't remember that, So I'm glad John Roberts is there. I appreciate the sentimental attempt to keep the American system alive. I thought I was very moved by that. And I know that I'm sure the people in Congress were like going, shh, we don't want to do that. No. Because, then if we do things, people will blame us for them. So I think that's, that John Roberts deserves to show up in his robes and look like a justice from the old America where we had a Congress.
I'll be honest. I'm just looking forward to watching the president jump out of the dais and full on pile drive John Roberts. It'll be really entertaining. Again, I'm rooting for pyrotechnics at this point. Speaking of lack of pyrotechnics, if there's one place more boring than the inside of the State of the Union, it's outside the State of the Union where Brecca is on the mall watching a bunch of elderly Democrats mill around uselessly. So Brecca, what is happening out there? Is it the most exciting scene?
It is a small crowd, still not much of an update. We just had Chris Van Hollen talk to people. He talked about Minneapolis and how people need to be like the protesters in Minneapolis and, rise ahead into the event, whatever. And then other update, we just had a national scientist. So, not much going on.
Wow, so excellent reporting, Brecca. I mean, you're right in the thick of things where all the action is happening. Yeah, I'm very excited that we have this sort of minute to minute. What's happening? Something. Nope, nothing happening. Brecca, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Honestly, I love that they're bringing forth, the real go-getters like Chris Van Hollen. They're like, you know what? We got to get the guy who really going to sell this thing. Let's get Chris Van Hollen, most recently seen like a schmuck down in El Salvador, hanging out with Camaro Abrego Garcia, the guy who's alleged to have beaten his wife. Well, meanwhile, the first family has arrived in the box. Barron Trump, whose head stretches all the way to the top of the Capitol dome, is standing there. Melania has entered. The president's other children are there as well. So they are all. I would
like to praise Melania for a moment. Melania has become, for me, the symbol of how petty and small-hearted and small-minded the left is. I mean, look at that woman. There's a beautiful first lady that we've got. She hasn't been on the cover of one lousy magazine. Can you imagine the small, kind of like miserly pinch-heartedness of going, we're not going to let her on the magazine because people might think she was pretty.
Dude, the magazines are so bad that Time magazine featured Eileen Gu. Like the lady, the Chinese, the traitor, like exactly. and meanwhile, you've got the American hockey team with some of the greatest photos of all time. Didn't make the cover of Time. The secretaries are entering the chamber.
Yeah, they are.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio entered just a moment ago. There you have RFK Jr., who thankfully for us is wearing a shirt and not jeans today. So that's exciting. He's not doing any push-ups on the floor of the chamber. Again, I was kind of rooting for it. Also, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is there as well.
Can I say something? Actually, can I say something about Melania? I really resent her. Actually, I actually really resent her. No, I do, because up until a month ago, I had the biggest opening weekend for any documentary at the box office of the decade, and then she comes along and.
She blew you out of the water.
It's not fair. She had the President of the United States at the premiere. It's like, I can't compete with that.
Matt, I think the moral of the story is next documentary, you try on so many shoes. The number of shoes that you try on, pantsuits, like we really go for it. I think we're going to have to blow out the budget on footwear for Matt Walsh is I think what we need to happen for the next. It's called What Am I Wearing? That is the next Matt Walsh
and
documentary.
And it was unfair because they unleashed the same amount of hate against her that they unleashed against you, and she was just showing off her clothes. It's like that's truly unfair. Yeah.
I gotta work hard for the hate. So
I know. You gotta work for your hatred. Yeah.
Well, we are awaiting the president entering the chamber for the State of the Union. When that happens, we are going to obviously go to the State of the Union. You can watch it live here and stick with us, and then afterward, stick around because Matt is going to go to sleep, but the rest of us are going to stay here and suffer through this interminable evening with you. There will be drinks. There won't be hard drugs because I know that there are law enforcement authorities watching. But we will be here back with you on the other end for all of our hot takes. Michael Knowles will somehow make his way to a place where we can talk to him. God love us all. And others. A wild cast of luminaries will be joining us post the State of the Union after the president speaks, which may or may not end anytime in the future. So we still have people who are entering the chamber. This is happening slowly. Matt and I were there last year. Matt, it was like 20 minutes late, right? It was 15, 20 minutes late, something like that, 10 minutes late. It took a while.
Yeah, and the speech was very, very long.
It was.
You can't get up to use the bathroom
Yes.
at any point, which
Oh, yeah.
I started to worry about that a little bit about
Same.
2/3 of the way through. I'm just like, but that's even rougher for the president. I've always wondered what do you do if you're the president giving the speech and you got to use the bathroom? These are the questions that are never asked.
The Mike Mulligan and the steam shovel questions, and obviously the president has tremendous stamina. He loves going on stem winders at these things. And I mean, I think that caffing is not an inappropriate solution for some people who are in that room, pretty obviously.
This is the worst commentary ever.
You know what, Drew? You take the lead, all right? It's all you. Let's see you do better, Drew. Hypercritical.
Let's talk.
Picayune.
Let's talk about movies.
Over here. What movies were we going to talk about? Wuthering Heights? Wuthering Heights. Oh my God. By the way, we totally could. It was horrific.
The book isn't that good. I mean, I've been.
Oh my God, that's where you're going to?
But I've always been a big Jane Eyre fan. I've never thought that Wuthering Heights was that good a book.
Okay, well, that was a really interesting conversation. By the way, we're building something bigger than just another news outlet. Daily Wire Plus gives you live uncensored shows every day. You can see why normally we'd like to censor them because of this. Breaking news in real time and investigative journalism that gives you the real story. No algorithms deciding what you get, no outside pressure telling us what to say. And if you believe in that mission, head on over to dailywire.com, become a member today. I can't believe that your take on Wuthering Heights, Drew, is that you don't like the book. Okay,
I haven't seen the movie. I haven't seen the movie.
Do not.
Do I want to see the movie? No.
You do not.
I mean, it looks terrible. Yeah.
Did you? You've seen the 1939 version, right?
Yeah, which is good. That's actually a good movie because they only did the first half of the book. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fabulous movie with Merle Oberon and Laurence Olivier. Terrific film with a great score. This movie is one of the worst movies ever, and it's truly immoral and quite evil and quite terrible. Well, speaking of I don't know, whatever. There are a bunch of people who are coming in. Lee Zeldin, the head of the EPA, is entering. Other cabinet secretaries entering. There's a very beardy fellow in the back who I don't recognize. And so I'll just physically describe people. Oh my God, Matt! I can't. You know what, Matt? Say something. Say something, Matt. Save me from myself.
That was a great transition. Speaking of, I don't know, whatever. That was good. I really appreciated that. No, I'm enjoying watching you, Ben, try to fill your way
stretch
through this thing.
I know.
Like,
we can talk about Mexico because finally I am now the only person on earth with the nickname El Mencho. that was a good thing. They killed El Mencho, leaving me the highest ranked person with that nickname.
It is something to say that in the last week we have defeated both of our neighbors at their top sport.
Exactly. And another thing about Canada. I have another thing to say about Canada. Not only are they killing people, but they're bad sports. They complained about, they said we played better than the Americans because we got more shots. The goalie was this amazing, and the goalie must be Flash from the comics. He was like just moving around, blocking every shot. And somebody has to explain to the Canadians that it doesn't matter how many shots you take. It actually matters how many pucks go into the goal. So I think that alone
that is stellar sports commentary. It does not matter how many shots you take.
That is my reason for invading them. That is my reason for invading them.
It looks like they are about to welcome the president. I know. How long am I supposed to stretch this? It's unbelievable. The vice president and the speaker of the House are, of course, behind the president of the United States. We are moments away from the president of the United States entering the chamber, and the State of the Union will begin shortly. There is the special envoy for the president on foreign policy, that's Steve Witkoff, who's been entering the room. The Democrats are not sort of garbed in their usual. Usually they have kind of these matching Halloween costumes that they wear.
Costumes they wear, yeah.
Yeah. Last year they did the all white routine.
Yep.
This year I guess they wore their invisibility cloaks. Many, a lot of those seats are clear. Matt, I've run out of things to say. Continue, whatever it was that you were doing. I know it's criticism of me, but you know what? I can take it. We need to fill this time somehow. Go for it.
You've run out of things to say, so you throw to me. I'm your guy. I'm your guy you bring in.
I'm getting my money's worth from you, Matt Walsh. Like, for God's sake, you get to ditch us all in the middle of this and go enjoy your family. And meanwhile...
We could do a live stream of me sleeping if we want. I mean, we could just cut to that.
That would be a little more exciting. But can we exult in the fact that the Democrats didn't show up and they're still humiliating themselves?
We can.
Said nobody's there.
By the way, I will say, more seriously, it could theoretically be an important speech. Really, it could, because we are sort of at an inflection point in the Trump presidency. If things keep going the way they are going for the president, and the midterms go the wrong way, it's going to be very difficult for him to effectuate his agenda. This is an opportunity where all the networks and we are live casting this entire thing. And that means that if he says something that truly is outstanding, or if there's anything clippable or memeable that comes out of it, then theoretically it could open a new front in sort of the narrative war that he's going to have to fight leading up to the midterm election. So
I think also this is an opportunity to aggressively defend ICE. You have the bully pulpit, and I mean we saw the Kalshi. Is he going to say the word Somalis? I hope he does, because let's talk about the Somalis and what they're doing and why ICE is there and who they're deporting. And this is an opportunity to really highlight that.
And also, I mean, when did it become all right to throw things at law enforcement? You know, I mean, can we not talk about is that like just norm? Oh, what's happening now? Something.
Well, now that the president is about to enter the chamber, right. He's coming in right now.
We've been rescued by Donald Trump. I think this is like
once again, just like 2024 election, we've been rescued by the president. So here he is entering the chamber. Obviously, if Matt and I were there last year, Drew, you've never been there, so you can't be part of this conversation.
They won't let me in.
No, I know. I mean, you've never received this honor, which I think is fitting. And typically when this happens, there's a big crowd that sort of comes around the president, people taking selfies with the president for postcards back home and such. And he's getting a big hand. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune is behind him. You see him entering slowly. It takes him a while to get to the podium, obviously. You can see the Democrats are sort of standing there, turning the other way or ignoring him. You have a couple of Congress people who are wearing the MAGA hats. Obviously, the president, I'm sure, is going to be quite happy about that. The Republicans, happy to see the president, obviously, as you would expect and suspect. So you can watch, as we say, the entire thing live. On the after end of this, we are going to be talking with various members of the Daily Wire team. Mary Margaret Olahan is going to be with us. So will Michael Knowles. He will stop by to explain what he saw in the room. The president continues to make his way down. I have to say, does the man ever age? He's exactly the same age as when he came down the escalator in 2015. It is really kind of an incredible thing.
Yeah. There is a picture of him in the hall at the White House. He gets older and older, but and he is, he's also got he's still got a lot of verve, a lot of energy. He's just like, the New York Times has been running these series of articles every now and again on how he's falling apart. And it's like everything else in the New York Times. When you compare it to reality, there's no match whatsoever. He's just an incredibly energetic person. He's a good advertisement for not drinking. Luckily, I haven't taken that on board, but still.
Unfortunately, he's also a great advertisement for not exercising, since he famously does not exercise in order to preserve his life force. And he looks great. I mean, really, like eat like trash, but don't have beer, and also don't exercise. And you too can be president of the United States and be extraordinarily well preserved. This is why it was always so funny. Democrats trying to come back at the president with, well, just like Joe Biden, you're just like Joe Biden. And it was like, no, you know what he's not like is Joe Biden, who was legitimately a barely ambulatory corpse by the time he left the office. So Isabel Brown is there tonight as well. So half the Daily Wire team or more is there. He is walking by John Roberts. He kind of walked right by John Roberts and right over to Brett Kavanaugh, which is not exactly surprising. He kind of ignored Amy Coney Barrett right there. He's shaking the hands of the Supreme Court justices. He's playing Duck Duck Goose with the Supreme Court justices, basically. And now he is greeting the chiefs of staff for the armed forces of the military, and making his way up onto the podium. Democrats are standing there, not clapping. You can see Elizabeth Warren in the background as non-moving as the statue we have of her in our studios. And the president is making his way up to the podium right now. He is getting a big ovation from the Republican side of the aisle, of course. J.D. Vance behind him, the vice president, the Speaker of the House behind him as well. The president is approaching the microphone. He's going to wave to the room a little bit. I assume that in a couple of moments he will begin to speak. Everyone on the Republican side of the aisle on their feet, up to and including the rafters. The Trump family, which of course is very large, is up in the rafters cheering. You can see there's tremendous enthusiasm from the Republican side of the aisle, and the president pointing to members of the crowd, clapping as he prepares to walk forward to the speech. Again, one of the benefits of having Mike Johnson behind the president is that he won't be ripping up the president's speech in the immediate aftermath of the State of the Union address. The president turning to the vice president as well as the speaker. In just a moment, he will be approaching the microphone to begin speaking. All right, in just a moment, we're going to go live to the President of the United States in the room. Pretty long ovation here for the president.
It's good. It's good color commentary, Ben.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was good.
Like,
yeah.
You know, I got a lot of respect. I have more respect now for the cable news people that like they can just kind of
wing it and say nothing.
Wing it over these moments. It actually
Listen, dude, you know what? I have a pathological aversion to saying nothing, and they put me on the air here, and they're like, you know what? Fill 20 minutes while he walks down a hall.
I do not have that. I don't have that aversion at all.
I noticed. Somebody's got to fill the time, dude. And someone, one of the three of us, will just sit there for long periods of time saying nothing quite comfortably. And somebody's got to say something. All right. Finally,
members of Congress
God,
have the high privilege and
go.
distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
It was punctuated by some pretty horrific Democratic behavior, which I think is going to be the story of the night. The president was obviously in fine fettle. He was in a very good mood throughout. There were some pretty great call-outs in the audience. A lot of call-outs in the audience. He is. Last year, he did a thing where somebody was essentially made an honorary member of the Secret Service in the audience. He did that a couple of times. This time, somebody was given the Congressional Medal of Honor. Somebody, it was announced, was going to receive the Presidential Medal of Honor. But again, I think the big headline coming out of this, aside from the length of the speech, which ran almost 2 hours, it ran approximately an hour and 48 minutes for those who are in the Kalshi markets. I believe that is the official time. We'll find out shortly. With that said, the big thing to me, Drew, and we're here with Andrew Klavan and Mary Margaret Olohan, the big thing to me, Drew, was the behavior of the Democrats, which you predicted it. We all sort of thought it was going to happen. Uniquely bad tonight, pretty horrific all the way through. We saw particularly Democrats sitting on their hands at odd moments. The president specifically called it out at one moment where he said, I basically cannot believe that you are sitting for this, when he said, why are you, basically, we stand for Americans, we work for Americans, we don't work for illegal immigrants, and Democrats sat on their hands. And I think he almost couldn't believe that they were going to fall for this trick, and then they fell for the trick. And of course, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib made fools of themselves. What was your big takeaway, Drew?
The only thing I would say differently than that is I don't think the takeaway was how badly they acted. I think it's how brutally he slapped them down. And I am not somebody who's always in favor of Trump's tendency to brutality against his enemies, but tonight I was, because the Democrats have been behaving like this for years. They've been behaving like this is not their country, that this country is not our country, that this is not the place they work for. The only time they cite American freedoms is when they're defending a gangster or an illegal immigrant or a killer. They never cite them in favor of actual American natives. They have embarrassed themselves. They've humiliated themselves. They've shown themselves to be petty and nasty and small. And he maneuvered them into this situation where he dug the pit, but they had to walk into it, and they did. And I was sitting there. I have to say, these speeches are not always the most interesting. This was a long speech. It had moments where it seemed to be go on forever. But in that moment, I sat up straight, and I was watching people get what they deserve. And I am not for vengeance, but I am for justice, and that was justice. And I just thought it was terrific to watch this master of the putdown find a group of people who had earned every little bit of it. And I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was great. And obviously, you know, I love all the celebrations of great heroes, the hockey players, Erica Kirk, it's wonderful. But that was just magnificent. And what, as you say, it was two things he did. He said, we are here. Our first job is to protect American citizens, not illegal immigrants. They sat on their hands. And then he told the story of a woman essentially being legally kidnapped so that they could trans her into a man. And he said, when they sat on their hands, then he said, you people are crazy. I just thought that was absolutely great. I'm telling you, if they hadn't earned it, I would think it was uncivil, but it was just right. It was just, he did the right thing, and it was great.
Well, Mary Margaret Olohan, our White House reporter, is here with us. So, Mary Margaret, you were in the room for it. What was sort of the mood? Obviously, when you have these sorts of events, you have the Republicans on one side of the aisle, the Democrats on the other side of the aisle. The big game seems to be now trying to figure out when Democrats stand, when they don't stand. Were there any moments where they actually stood in unity, or was it pretty much on their hands the entire time?
No, I wouldn't say there were any moments when everyone stood in unity. I think, you know, many of them stood for Charlie Kirk, thankfully, and there was chants of Charlie, Charlie, Charlie. Not everyone stood for him. And I think, in general, the mood in the room was the Democrats on the one hand, kind of saltily sitting around, and then a few of the more radical Democrats shouting, yelling. In fact, I'm hearing from other reporters in the room, I didn't hear it myself, that Ilhan Omar said the F word at one point towards Trump. Can't confirm that myself, but again, that's what other reporters are saying. And then meanwhile, the president himself, the reporters at Daily Wire, we were all talking about this earlier, his mood was almost jovial. It was exuberant. He was just so excited going into this speech, all the way through it. And I listened to the president a lot. I spent a lot of time listening to his remarks. He sailed through this speech. He, touched on every single point, on every single guest, but he moved really quickly through it. It wasn't really the more weavy speech that we might have been expecting, that we might have even seen last year. And to me, Ben and Drew, I think that signals that he is very aware that he had the eyes of the nation, if not the world, on him, and he was using this speech to great effect. The midterms are coming up. He knows that he needs to spend a lot of time reaching American voters, letting them know what his agenda is. And to me, a lot of this was showing American voters, don't forget that the Democrats are not on your side. Look at all these different examples of things that they don't stand with you with. Don't forget that they still support radical gender ideology. Don't forget that they don't want to protect your young women on the metro. They don't care about your young women as they're taking metro rides and if they're brutally killed by violent criminals. And so all of these messages are going to make for fantastic talking points going forward. They're going to make for fantastic stories going forward. And, especially when it came to gender ideology, I found this really interesting because you all know that I spent a lot of time covering this before I became the White House correspondent. He harpened on that one specific word, crazy. He says, this is just crazy. And that is one of the messages of his 2024 campaign that I think resonated so deeply with American voters who are so tired of hearing about radical gender ideology and being told that it was normal and not insane. And so he's hearkening back to those words and reminding the public, no, it's not okay for a little girl to be taken away from her parents by the state and transitioned. And he actually suggested he might do something about that as well, which I have a lot of sources telling me they're trying to get him to sign an executive order on that. So I was really interested in that as well.
And one of the things that I think was pretty astonishing about the speech is how little actual policy there was in it. So he mentioned some of the policies that, of course, he has promoted. As you say, Mary Margaret, he moved really fast through that. So he would mention a policy that he'd done, and then he'd move pretty quickly into story time. And he would pick somebody out of the audience and explain how the policy had personally impacted somebody in the audience rather than going into the details of the policy, which I thought was actually quite smart because the overall sort of tenor of the speech was less about, here are the things that I'm doing that you may or may not agree with or understand, and more about, I actually care about people, and these people over here don't care about people. And them not clapping for the people became, I thought, his chief weapon tonight. I thought he used it to great effect. For those who missed it, obviously the most evocative moment was the moment when the president got into a war of words with Ilhan Omar. He was speaking about fraud in Somali communities in Minnesota. She started screaming back at him, saying that he should be ashamed of himself. She did not have the microphone, and that is a major disadvantage when you are talking about a speech like this one. Just for those of us who are watching it on TV and are not in the room. I remember last year when I was in the room, you could hear pretty clearly what Democrats were shouting. But if you're watching it on TV through a screen, you can't hear at all what the Democrats are shouting. You can only hear what Trump is saying back to them. And so what you ended up with was something that sounded like this. Do we have the clip of the president going at it with Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib?
Sanctuary cities that protect the criminals and enact serious penalties for public officials who block the removal of criminal aliens. In many cases, drug lords, murderers all over our country, they're blocking the removal of these people out of our country, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
Now, I will say that one of the shots that was excluded from that clip was a shot that appeared to be into the crowd, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar at that point, and it is pretty obvious from just some basic lip reading that while people were chanting USA, Rashida Tlaib was mouthing KKK, which is pretty astonishing stuff. And if indeed that is what she was mouthing, then that is going to be a massive headline tonight and tomorrow. As well, it should be. She, of course, is a radical. She stood with terror supporters her entire career in the Congress. Same thing is true of Ilhan Omar. If they want to make that the face of the Democratic Party, man, you are welcome to it. What a massive boo-boo for the Democratic Party. Mary Margaret, while we have you, I want to ask you about the sort of most fun moment of the night, which obviously was the U.S. men's hockey team coming in, which was a kick. I mean, I love that we basically got the president as sportscaster, which was really fun. He basically narrated the game and talked about the various numbers of saves and all the rest of it. What was the mood in the room like when they came in?
Well, they're just so much fun, and they came in right in between all of the press. So, the Capitol Hill press are sitting all together in their press seats, and they're looking a little dour and not super into the whole evening. And this USA men's hockey team just came down in between them. There's a really funny shot on Twitter that people should check out, where there's a reporter who has a mask on, and he's kind of slumped over his computer and looking really dejected. And then right next to him, these hockey players are just beaming, absolutely full of life, delighted to be there. It's a hilarious contrast. But the room just exploded with shouts and excitement. And the president, obviously, he knows every play of that game because he watched it. He understands it. He cares about it. He loves these guys genuinely, as we know from the video of him interacting with them as they were in the locker room celebrating their win. I heard that these guys were hanging out in a side room with pizza and beer, which I think is a fun way to help them enjoy the State of the Union without being too locked in while they're still celebrating. And, this is just a very fun part of this evening. And I think also lends itself to the very patriotic element of this State of the Union. We're celebrating American excellence. We're celebrating patriotism. We're celebrating, for example, this service member who was part of the raid on Maduro. I loved the story that the president told about him, how his wife dipped his dog tags in holy water before he left because she knew he was going on some dangerous mission. And now he was here and honored in front of the whole world for his heroism in that mission. So just so many examples like this of Americans being honored and the president celebrating how truly amazing our country is. And it gives me chills just talking about it. It's just, we've been experiencing patriotism unlike anything we've seen in many years, and it's a lot of fun to be a part of it.
Now, Drew, obviously you mentioned earlier the "these people are crazy" clip. So did you, Mary Margaret, and we do have that clip as well. For those who missed it, this was the moment when the president basically lost it at the Democrats for failing to recognize that, hey, maybe, treating minor girls as though they are boys is a crazy thing to do. Here's what that sounded like when the president went off.
Everybody stands up. These people are crazy. I'm telling you, they're crazy. Amazing. Incredible. Boy, oh boy. We're lucky we have a country. With people like this, Democrats are destroying our country, but we've stopped it just in the nick of time, didn't we?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question about this. We always talk about the State of the Union, and we always try to be honest about the fact that it usually doesn't move the needle very much, but it can change the dialogue sometimes. And one of the things that's been shocking to me, as Trump's polls have not been very good, as people have said, unbelievably, that they're still as bad, they're worse off than they were a year ago. One of the things that will be interesting to see, if maybe he did remind people of what it was like under Joe Biden, why they voted him back into office, and what it would be like to have them back. I mean, how can anybody think, Trump is so bad, this guy is so bad, that we have to go back to children being butchered, to people being hired according to race, to this absolute unrelenting hatred of the country as an entity. It's hard for me to see how people can really think that. I may be wrong, maybe the polls are right, but I do wonder if that idea is so fragile that he may be broken.
Drew, I think one of the things that tonight showed, and I think this is why Republicans have been looking for a face of the opposition to identify. I think one of the big flaws that Republicans have had to face down is the fact that Joe Biden was so forgettable that we've all forgotten that he was president already. I mean, truly, he was such a non-entity that by the end of his presidency, he was not even really the president. Kamala Harris was effectively the president. And so what that means is that it's very easy to sort of go, oh yeah, who was even president before this guy? Maybe it was better. It doesn't even clock in your memory that Joe Biden was president. If you had told me that Donald Trump was president and then he was president again and there was no kind of middle term of Joe Biden, that wouldn't shock. 30 years from now, people are not going to remember that in the same way that people kind of don't remember that Benjamin Harrison served between Grover, Cleveland. I think that is going to be a reality. And so I think that's been a challenge for President Trump. There is no one of his stature in the Democratic Party for him to pummel. And I think that one of the things that you saw tonight, and this is why that Ilhan Omar Rashida Tlaib fail, is a real fail for the Democrats, and I think a real danger for the Democrats. people don't like those people. They don't like them. Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, yes. I mean, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are totally radical and insane. Rashida Tlaib was wearing watermelon earrings in solidarity with the Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip. Rashida Tlaib was wearing a button that said F ICE on the air. Right? There was a point at which Ilhan Omar, pretty clearly on camera, mouthed about the president that he was a sick F. Like all that stuff was happening. It was all on camera. And so when you put that on the camera, you say, okay, here are your choices. It's this versus this. President Trump in a vacuum always doesn't poll very well. He never has polled amazingly in a vacuum, going all the way back to 2015, 2016. He always tends to poll a lot better the minute you put somebody else on the other side. Because again, as I said earlier on the show, Mary Margaret, there are two things in politics that are important. One is making it hard to vote for your opponent, and second is making it easy to vote for you. And the president sometimes has trouble with the second, but he's always very, very good at the first, and he needs an opponent. I've been saying for a decade that the president is a hammer in search of a nail, and when there aren't enough nails, he starts to hit kittens. Well, right now, he may have found some nails to hammer here, and I think that tonight was pretty good evidence of that, Mary Margaret.
Absolutely. And I mean, earlier today, we saw Kamala Harris saying that she might be considering running again. So I'm sure the president is excited to actually have a foe on the other side of the aisle, because until now, we haven't had anyone truly declare. So we might have another Kamala, and that would be a very fun presidential run. But yeah, I think the president's looking out there. He's seeing Ilhan Omar in a hijab, shouting insults, shouting swear words, just shouting and acting in a rowdy way. And she's not a formidable opponent. She's very aggressively progressive. She's very radical. The whole world knows that. So that's an easy win for the White House, where they can point to her and say, Americans don't agree with you. And in Kamala Harris, he might have a better opponent, but he's got Gavin Newsom imitating his style on Twitter. Again, it's not a formidable opponent. And so when it comes to things like this, where he can literally look the American people in the eye and say, do you see all these Democrats not standing for the things that you care about so deeply? And I keep coming back to that young woman who was on the train, who was so cruelly attacked by that criminal and killed. This actually happened maybe days before Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And it was one of the last things that he himself talked about, how deeply he felt this. And to see these Democrats not stand for her mother, just unthinkable. So I think that's one that's really going to resonate with people. It's going to stay with us for a long time. And whether or not these people are protesting specific policies, they have to understand that these are real lived American stories. They're the most powerful weapon that we have in favor of the truth, because they literally lived these things. And so Trump having all these Democrats look them in the eye and not do anything about it, it was very well done, very well executed in terms of a oration style strategy. And I think his comms team is probably patting themselves on the back tonight, because this was a well played speech.
The president obviously took on inflation as well. He talked a lot about the economy. He really relegated his foreign policy remarks to the end, which I think is smart politics. Obviously, the American people are much more concerned about domestic political issues than they are right now about foreign policy. It was sort of fascinating on a foreign policy level to hear what the president had to say, given the fact that we have such an enormous military presence ready in the Middle East right now about Iran. Obviously, the president's comments about Iran, he seems skeptical of the idea that Iran is going to come through with some sort of last-minute concessions. He's maintaining the same position he has maintained for legitimately his entire political career, which is that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. But he went a little bit further than that as well, talking about their ballistic missile capacity, their attempts to redevelop terrorist support. All of those are sort of issues in negotiation. There is supposed to be, at the end of this week, some sort of proposal from the Iranians, a sort of last-ditch proposal to stave off the possibility of American strikes. Here is what the president of the United States had to say about Iran in the middle of the speech.
My preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy. But one thing is certain, I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror, which they are by far, to have a nuclear weapon. Can't let that happen.
Well, joining us on the line is Michael Knowles. Michael has finally reached a place where he can talk. My nightmares are all coming true. For a while there, we were okay, but now Michael has arrived, looking dapper. His hair a little bit mussed after spending 9 hours in that room during the State of the Union address. I do have to say, he's got the young Republican look going there, Michael Knowles. So, Michael, you were in the room for that. last year it was me and Walsh. This year it was you and Isabel. So what was it like? Did you enjoy yourself? Was it the party you'd always imagined?
It was. This was my second time at the State of the Union. We seem to be trading on and off, except the first time that I went, Biden was speaking. And so it was a much stranger experience because it was clear they had injected him with some kind of methamphetamine. And that was the year that he just kind of screamed everything at exactly the same volume for 91 minutes. And so this was my first year getting to see President Trump. You and Matt got to see Trump last year, though technically it was not a State of the Union. It was actually just a joint address to Congress. So anyway, I was honored to be at the first President Trump State of the Union. And he was great, because he was focused. He did a little weaving here and there, but he really stuck to the script. The script was written extraordinarily well, and where Trump did improvise, it was extremely effective. I was sitting front row right over the Democrats, so I got a pretty keen look, and very little surprises me in politics. Some of their behavior surprised and viscerally angered even me. When Trump set them up and he said, hey, stand up if you agree with this statement. America should be for Americans. And the Democrats wouldn't stand up for it. It was an amazing setup line, but really pretty shocking. And then it got worse from there. There you say, look at these foolish Dems, this is crazy. But from there, President Trump cheered bringing the hostages home from Gaza. I noticed Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, who were right down there in front of me, they did not stand up. I think other Dems didn't stand up either. That was pretty shocking. And then the most egregious moment of the night, this beautiful tribute to Charlie Kirk and to his widow Erica, who was there directly across the way. We could see her. And the Democrats refused to really acknowledge it. President Trump then gives them the final out, even moving past Charlie to the message we should all take away from Charlie's assassination by a leftist. Trump says, we're one nation under God, and we should reject political violence of all kinds. And many Democrats refuse to stand up for that. Chilling, a reminder that they want to kill us. And I'm not saying all of them want to kill us, but a surprising number of them want to kill us, overtly support political violence. In the Chamber of Commerce, in the Chamber of Congress at the State of the Union address, really chilling political malpractice by the Democrats. And so I understand why Hakeem Jeffries early on said, hey, Dems, just chill out. Or you know what? Maybe don't show up at all. Just please don't pull your usual shenanigans. We want to look half normal. And they couldn't even do that.
Well, we do have that clip of the president basically baiting them where he says, America should be for defending Americans, and the Democrats take the bait. I honestly, the president is a master of this game. He knows the game better than anyone else in it. He has changed the game fundamentally in just the time that he's been president, because this sort of stuff never used to happen. I'm old enough to remember when it was a national scandal when Joe Wilson, a congressman from South Carolina, once yelled, "You lie," at President Obama, who was in fact lying. And now this has become the way that politics is done. And the president's taken advantage of that to full effect. Here's the president saying, hey guys, maybe you should stand up if you think that, America is for the American people.
If you agree with this statement, then stand up and show your support. The first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens.
And there are the Democrats committing political suicide on the air. So that again, amazing decisions being made there. Now, Michael, obviously the president comes into this with a low approval rating, historically low approval rating for him. The midterm elections, right now Democrats are running about 5 points ahead in the generic congressional ballot. The real question about every State of the Union address, as we were discussing beforehand, is whether it really is going to reset the table. Will it be a sort of inflection point, or will it just be a thing that happened, and a week from now we'll be back to sort of business as usual? What do you make of it? Do you think the president can generate some sort of lasting momentum on the back of what was a pretty tremendous speech?
This was a great pivot, and I'm not saying that this will save the midterms for the Republicans or anything, but it certainly reset the message in exactly the way the president had to do it. We were all making our predictions before the State of the Union, and I got a bunch of the particulars wrong, how long it would be or who he'd call out or whatever. But the one part that I got right wasn't even a prediction of what would happen so much as something I was really hoping would happen, which is that President Trump would say, look, Americans, we're making you safer. We're making this country normal again. These people, those people over there are crazy. That was an actual line from the speech, and it completely landed because the Dems refused to back down from transing the kids. I mean, it was, the extreme of their ideology. What he had to do was say, look, Americans, I understand that you feel things are a little precarious right now, whether we're talking about migration, whether we're talking about the economy. This is why I think some of the economic favorability numbers are low, even though a lot of the actual nuts and bolts of the economy are pretty good. It's just people feel uneasy. They feel big shifts. They are uncertain about the future. And what Trump had to do is say, we've got you. We're the adults in the room. We're going to make you safe. We're going to make you wealthy. We're going to restore the norms and the kind of country that you've loved for 250 years, because this is America's birthday. I think he completely achieved that objective. And so I think it does give him very good momentum going into the midterms. But of course, now one speech is not enough. Now the Republicans need to stay on message. Impossible for Republicans, and two, they need to be able to carry that through the miasma of misinformation and Democrat ops through November.
I mean, obviously, I think that it is true that that Republicans must stay on message. It will definitely help if we don't have, to deal with questions about whether Erica Kirk killed her husband or not. That seems to be a gigantic fail that is happening in the midst of the Republican online space. That seems like a very stupid thing for people to follow a rabbit hole on. And a lot of the infighting that's been happening around conspiracy theories surrounding the president. If you would like to see the president not impeached after the Democrats win back Congress, then now would be a really good time to actually look at all the things that he has done over the course of the last year to fix many of the problems left by Joe Biden. Mary Margaret, what is actually on the schedule for the president in the coming days and the coming weeks? Because very often you will see after the State of the Union that there's sort of a tour that happens where the president goes around and tries to retail some of the bigger messages that he has been pushing.
Yeah, the president is flying out of state to have another affordability event. These are something that we hear about a lot because the legacy press is obsessed with asking the White House, why isn't the president talking about affordability more, though he talks about it all the time. So currently this week, I believe he's headed to Georgia. I need to double check on which state, but he is having another affordability event. These are really heralded or shepherded by Susie Wiles, who's really trying to keep the president focused on this affordability message so that, all these critics who are saying he's too focused on foreign policy won't be able to say, I told you so, when the midterms come and go, if the president doesn't do so well, if his candidates don't do so well. So that's definitely on his radar. But all of these topics that we heard him talking about tonight, going into the future, these are things that he's going to continue talking about. We were able to pretty accurately assess what he'd be talking about tonight based on what the White House has been harping on. They've been really consistent in what they're focused on. What they're talking about is the economy, it's immigration, it's keeping our cities safe, it's this foreign policy, ending all these wars. They've been very consistent and focused on these issues, and the president has been hammering this home. So I think when you head into the midterms, unlike what we're hearing from legacy media, that Americans only care about affordability, that this is all they want to hear about from the president, there's a lot of different topics that we've been hearing the president talk about. And like I was saying earlier, this sense of patriotism and pride in our country, I don't think that's lost on the public. I don't think that the USA men's hockey team winning this victory, I don't know that that's just a victory on I was going to say the hockey field. I don't know how to talk about sports. The hockey rink. I think it's bigger than that, and we all see that. It's this sense that this is bigger than sports. This is bigger than these hockey players. This is American pride returning to our country. And so these are all things that are playing into the situation going forward, and the president can talk about them all, but now he also can talk about these Democrats not standing for these very important issues. And when Ilhan Omar goes home tonight and she gets all excited to have her team post that clip on Instagram of her just sitting there for all these issues, that's her big win. That's the Democrats' big win tonight. And they clearly don't understand the massively tragic optics of these things. So for Trump and his team, I think they're going to go to bed feeling pretty good about themselves tonight. And they'll have a lot to talk about on the road on these affordability campaign stops. And I don't think it will be just affordability that will be the topic of conversation.
Well, Mary Margaret, I know that you need to go to sleep because you need to get up early in the morning and then go cover the rest of this over at the White House. Thanks for stopping by the coverage. And Isabel is going to be joining us in just a moment. I know that she was at the State of the Union as well. So, Michael, I'm going to ask you some more questions because Drew and I had to suffer for like several hours in your absence. You should have heard me tap dancing in order to just get to the president, getting to the microphone. It was an astonishing feat of legerdemain, I must say myself. But I think that the big question that's always the takeaway from all of this is also, did the president sort of reunify the party? This has always been sort of a problem in the aftermath of a second-term victory. Presidents have a tough time holding their coalition together. And obviously you're seeing a lot of fracturing inside the coalition right now. I think that, people blame different folks for that fracture. But the president is the person who, at the end, is the leader of the coalition. And the agenda that he spelled out is a pretty widely agreed upon agenda inside the Republican Party. Do you think that he's going to get some of the reluctant Trumpers sort of back on board, given his focus on his victories?
Yes, I think he has done that, and it's remarkable because Trump has been called a divisive figure for the last decade, or really more than a decade, but certainly a decade in politics. And so the fact that this man is now probably the most unifying figure on the right is really impressive. I mean, we saw this in his reelection, in that he was reelected this time with the popular vote. And then so much focus has been paid to conspiracy theories and division on infighting on the right, and really factions of the right splintering off into ways that are almost unrecognizable. And what I think is quite charming about that, actually, is we seem to look to the activists and the pundits and the chattering class for unity, but they really have no incentive to unify or to even accomplish very much at all in politics. And so where pundits and podcasters have been irresponsible with their rhetoric, Mr. Trump, who everyone tells us is the most irresponsible orator of our time, Trump is actually the one who's being responsible here and who is reaching out. I think he's really been able to bring together a broad coalition of people. And even the way he spoke tonight about foreign policy, there were people who veer a little more on the isolation side, a little more skeptical of intervention, who are up there standing for strength and the Fordo strikes in Iran. And there were people who were, There were people who were a little skeptical of, the tariffs, who were right up there cheering with President Trump when he was casting a little bit of shade at the Supreme Court, but not too much shade at the Supreme Court because he knows he's going to need the Supreme Court in the future. So, Drew loves to talk about how Trump learns things over time, and he obviously does. And one of the things he's learned is to be nuanced with his words, and I think that showed tonight.
Isabel, sorry, I want to welcome in Isabel Brown, and then we can get to Andrew, who has been sitting there, as always, awaiting death. But before we do that, Isabel, who is significantly more sprightly than any of us right now.
All of us put together.
All of us has joined us here. So, Isabel, what was the big day under the big top like over at the United States Capitol?
I don't know if sprightly is the right word, Ben. I think I just don't sleep at night right now with a 10-month-old, so I'm used to being up into all hours of the night. I'm feeling good tonight. It's a great time. The energy here is so palpable, and I think we've touched on a lot of the negativity surrounding the speech. Certainly there were a lot of shocking moments sitting in the gallery. I was across the room, it seems, from where Michael was sitting this evening, but closer to the president's guests and looking across the room at most of the Democrat colleagues from the Republican side who refused to stand up and cheer for America, to call for an end to political violence, to offer condolences to widows and grieving mothers whose children had been killed by radical extremists and repeat offenders. But you also saw a bit of an American comeback tonight, and I don't want the media to forget that we saw a resounding standing ovation from virtually every single individual clapping and cheering and singing for multiple minutes on end when the USA hockey team walked in to show us their Olympic gold medals and chanting USA across party lines. That's something that would have been impossible about 12 months ago, and yet here we are celebrating American exceptionalism again without being called racist for it. So I think there's a lot to glean from some of the negativity, certainly, but there's a lot to look forward to and so much optimism to have, to know that in many ways our country is back.
So, Michael, I've barred Drew from this conversation for too long, and I can see that he really, really wants to talk more about the State of the Union address.
I actually do want to say something, though, about what Isabel said and what Knowles said before. I think the great triumph of the speech was a negative triumph. I think that he did bring it back into the center of our attention how crazy and bad the Democrats are and will be again if they get back in office. He made them act it out. It was brilliant theater. It was great stuff. The positive message is going to be harder because the positive message means that people have to feel it in their pocketbooks because they're never, ever going to see it in the mainstream press. The press has practiced inducing amnesia. The minute Trump solves a problem, it vanishes from the news. The minute the border is closed, nobody talks about the border anymore. They just always leap in to the next big problem. Oh, isn't the way people are being deported terrible? And that's been the trick that they've used, and it's been pretty effective. But I think at some point, people are going to stop and take a breath and say, are things really worse? And do I want these people back? He set up the negative really well tonight. I don't think any words are going to accomplish the positive message that he wants to put forward. I think that's going to have to happen over time. I think he should be hammering away at it. He should be telling people what he's done, but people are going to have to feel it in their pocketbooks before it's real. I myself, it was months ago, but I myself was driving along and suddenly noticed that gas prices had plummeted. I hadn't read anything about it in the paper. I just suddenly saw it there. Nobody's been talking about it. And yet gas prices, of course, were one of the big headlines for a long time. Every problem Trump solves disappears from the headlines. But eventually, I think, put together, they will seep into the consciousness of America. And you just have to hope they do that in time before the midterms. And I also just want to add quickly that I'm really glad that the Virginia governor is delivering the response because that's 25 minutes in which you won't be raising my taxes.
Well, she actually is Abigail Spanberger, the new governor of Virginia. And she is, and she apparently, one of the things that I'm noting from our friends over on X is that apparently they've militarily regimented the amount of applause that the audience can deliver for her lines. They legitimately, like they're basically saying you can applaud for 3 seconds and you sit down, which sounds like it's unnatural and weird. And also I want implemented pretty much every State of the Union from now on, because the amount of time, it's like a football game where the amount of time between plays is really, really, really long. So we'll see whether there is yet to be a really good response to a State of the Union address, I think, in my lifetime. My guess is that what you're seeing of Abigail Spanberger is the last you will see of the speech ever, because we've been doing this for years and years and years, and never have we ever seen that sort of thing. Now, Michael, when we look at sort of the impact going forward, I think one of the questions here, and it was something you mentioned, Drew, is that Trump has solved a bunch of problems. And because those problems are solved, we don't think about them anymore. And this is something that I believe some of the consultants had told the Republican Party was, Trump basically solved the southern border problem. So don't even bother talking about it because nobody cares because it's already solved. And this is, again, part of the issue for him is that when a thing happens, we no longer think about that thing. Whereas when it is sort of percolating, then we think about the thing. And so the president has been so dominant in, for example, getting rid of DEI that if he mentions DEI, we all kind of go, well, yeah, I mean, he did do that. But have we thought about that very much lately? That's why I thought it was effective, Michael, for him to go to stories that remind us that these are very, very real phenomena.
Yes, and the personal stories are the key, too. So the anecdotes, which remind us, especially in the present, that these things still exist. Gavin Newsom didn't say, I want to see more trans kids 3 years ago. Gavin Newsom said, I want to see more trans kids like 3 weeks ago. This is still percolating here. So when a guy like Andy Beshear, who is a serious presidential candidate, Democrat governor of Kentucky, when he comes out and says Abigail Spanberger is the model for Democrats this year, what he's saying is we're going to lie and run like moderates, and then if we are elected, we're going to implement the most radically left-wing agenda that you can possibly imagine. So they're kind of honest about it. They're honest liars. And what President Trump needs to do is remind us this isn't really dead. The Democrats can reopen the border tomorrow. Just as President Trump shut the border without a new law, and he did it basically overnight, so too the Democrats can just reopen it. They can let the criminals out of prison. They can re-implement all of the DEI and the radical gender agenda and the ideology. They can go down this litany, to say nothing of the economic havoc. Do not underestimate, to quote Barack Obama, do not underestimate the degree to which Joe Biden can F things up. Well, that's true of the whole Democrat Party. And so I think Trump needs to remind us that these threats are still here. And really what is called for the Republican campaigns is a kind of Willie Horton campaign on steroids. A reminder, one, there are actual super predators that the Dems are letting out of prison to light women on fire on New York City subways and rape and murder and kill. That's happening right now. But two, you're seeing this at an international scale when we're looking at Venezuelan and Mexican drug cartels, or frankly in the Middle East or in Russia or in China. You're seeing this throughout the country. These threats really are imminent. The Republican Party is not the party of chaos. We're not the party, as the Democrats say, that is bringing chaos to the streets of Minneapolis. We're the party that is restoring order. The Democrats bring the chaos. We restore the order. Trump gave us some really evocative images for that tonight, and I think it's an effective model going into November.
Isabel, I want to give you the last word here, because I'll be honest with you. It's been a really, really long night, and I would really, really like to go to sleep now. So you get the last word, and then we can all go to bed.
I think it's obvious, Ben, more than ever before, that for many, many years now in our country, we have been living in two different Americas. Clearly in what we applaud for and what we fight for and against, but also in just our most basic values as Americans. What I saw tonight sitting in the gallery of the U.S. House of Representatives with half the Supreme Court, the Joint Chiefs, the entire presidential cabinet, the president and vice president of the United States, certainly almost every member of Congress, and the most influential Americans from across multiple walks of life, was a clear dichotomy between the United States of America as we have known and loved it for the last 250 years, the greatest society the world has ever known, built upon the foundation of our identity as one nation under God, and complete Marxist total chaos, anarchy in society that rewards criminals over our citizens, that champions open borders, that refuses to prosecute those who are killing our citizens day in and day out, who champions political violence for your enemies rather than trying to come over our differences to be united in the concept of e pluribus unum again. This is not sustainable. As Abraham Lincoln is famous for saying, a house divided cannot stand. But I am hopeful that what we're seeing inside of Washington with this concept of the unity party is beginning to extend to the rest of the country as well. Most of these issues we talked about this evening were not the economy, shockingly. They were social issues, like transing our kids and some of these conversations we've been having for many years in the e-space, but very few people here in Washington have been having. I think that was intentional because these are 90-10 issues. These are American issues versus chaos and Marxist issues. And voters have a very clear image moving forward into midterms in 2028 and beyond what kind of a country we have the chance to save versus the one that's going to come into fruition if we fail to act courageously today.
Well, folks, I hope that you enjoyed this so much more than I personally did. But if you enjoy our work here at Daily Wire, please become a subscriber and a supporter over at DW+, because that allows us to continue to bring you awesome and or mediocre content like we have been bringing you all night long. For my colleagues, Andrew Klavan, Michael Knowles, Isabel Brown, thanks so much for stopping by. We're another year older. Congrats. It's now 2029, and we will see you in just a little bit.